It's Friday on Daily Delivery. I'm Michael Rand. Happy to be back for final show of the week, and a good one at that. Marcus Fuller from the Tribune will join me here in just a few minutes to talk Gopher basketball, to talk college basketball as a whole, talk about his Basketball Across Minnesota feature. Lots of interesting stuff with the Gophers right now, looking to be an interesting team this year. And Marcus and I will get into all sorts of stuff with that team and college basketball recruiting, things of that nature. So stick around definitely for that. An unusual NFL result on Thursday that we will link to the Vikings. Got the Vikings thought at the end of the show as well. Some more college basketball towards the end. Some wild stuff here in a minute. First, though, what did I miss? By the way, someone emailed me the other day asking, why do I call this segment What Did I Miss, when it sounds like something that I've watched or paid attention to. I call it What Did I Miss, putting myself in the position of you, the listener, thinking of what might you have missed in the last 12 to 24 hours. So that's why I call it that. If just a point of clarity, and what did I miss might be what did I miss, and naming this segment What Did I Miss. But anyway, what did I miss? Timberwolves. I started watching that game last night, and they go down big early. It's like 16-3, something like that when I turn it on. 16-2, something like that. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. This is the time where we're going to find out the thing that Chris Hine and I talked about on Thursday's show. How do they handle real adversity? How do they handle, being in a position where things aren't going well on the road? They've already lost a game at New Orleans. Now they're down big to a good team, Dallas. Luka Doncic is going crazy early on, making threes. They're just making shots left and right. So, okay, here's your test. They're probably going to lose their second in a row here. This probably just isn't their night. And now we're going to find out a little bit more about kind of some adversity. And instead, of course, they end up winning by 18. They look great for the last 3.5 quarters. They get it to, basically tied at halftime. They're down by 1 at halftime, but they're back in a position where the game is certainly in a winnable position at that point, and then they really put the accelerator on in the third and fourth quarters. Really been impressed with how they've come out of halftime this year. That was a real problem last year. This year it's been much, much better. Looking like that kind of team, that veteran team that can withstand some early surges, things like that. Now, as I was watching that game, they won 119-101. As I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, they're treating the Mavericks like other teams used to treat them. The Wolves, I can remember so many games over the last 3 or 4 years as they were kind of trying to get over the hump, getting good, but still not great, where they'd blitz a team right away, where they'd get up to that big lead initially, and then it would all fall apart. And a veteran team would just pick them apart, catch up to them, and ultimately pass them. That was what they've done to several teams this season, including the Mavericks last night. They just ultimately suffocated Luka. He had a good game, but he doesn't have much supporting cast around him with Kyrie Irving out. And so there you had it. They coast, they cruise at the end. Naz Reid has like 7 3-pointers, 27 points. They get massive contributions from other bench guys. Nickeil Alexander-Walker continues to have a great year. Interesting in this game, not necessarily a departure from every other game this season, but with Ant back, Anthony Edwards was back in the lineup, did not shoot well, but his presence matters. With Ant back, with Jaden McDaniels starting now, the 9-man rotation in this game did not include Shake Milton, did not include what you would consider a true backup point guard. In the minutes that Mike Conley Jr. didn't play, you had Nickeil Alexander-Walker, you had some Kyle Anderson running some point forward, you had Ant handling the ball. You did not have Shake Milton getting any regular run in this game. So that was an interesting thing for me to see, that when Conley went to the bench in a 9-man rotation, Troy Brown was still in the rotation. Then, of course, Kyle Anderson, Naz Reid, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker were your 3 others off the bench. That was your 9-man rotation in this game with everybody healthy. Interesting to watch that going forward. But, just another game. They're 18-5. Another game that shows how good they are right now. A road game against a team that's been going well, a team that has like the third or fourth best record in the West. Yeah, there's no Kyrie Irving, but you're going to be missing guys every night. Ant just came back. He was rusty. He didn't look great. If you're going to put an asterisk by a loss, put an asterisk by the Monday loss for the Wolves because Ant didn't play, right? Like someone's going to be out in almost every one of these games. That is a good win at Dallas against a very good team, against a very talented Luka Doncic-led team, and it's just impressive. Maybe we'll have to wait for that adversity for another time because it certainly didn't happen, at least beyond a 3 or 4 minute stretch at the beginning of the game on Thursday night. Now the Wild had plenty of adversity earlier this season. They seem to be coming out of that one for the 6th time in 8 games since John Hines took over as head coach, a 3-2 shootout win over Calgary, getting that extra point important. Matt Boldy good again. Marco Rossi good again. I mean, those two guys have been great. Rossi's been great all year. Boldy's been great since the coaching change, kind of getting better contributions. Philip Gustafson's been great since the coaching change as well. A little bit of adversity, though, in the bigger picture. Reading Sarah McClellan's story this morning that Bill Guerin, Wild GM, had been investigated after a complaint of alleged verbal abuse in the workplace. That was originally reported by The Athletic. Sounds like an investigation is complete. Determined that there was not a fireable offense committed by Guerin. The Wild issued a statement to the Star Tribune that said the Wild takes its code of conduct seriously. We recently concluded 2 separate incidents into alleged violations of that code of conduct and have taken appropriate steps to address the matters raised to our attention. The club will not comment further. Now, Guerin was at the game Thursday night, according to Sarah's story, so interesting to watch that there. I don't know exactly what that all entailed, but that's a little bit of a sideshow that they probably don't need right now, don't want right now. But interesting to see if that becomes anything else down the road. It sounds like this particular incident has been wrapped, but wondering if anything else will come down the road. So a little bit of adversity for the Wild. See if they can kind of see how that impacts their season. But a good win for them again, and 6 out of 8 since the coaching change.
Grand Casino would like to take a moment and salute the true football fan. The passion, the hope, the anticipation, that incomparable feeling of winning. Grand Casino would also like to take a moment to remind you that you can find all that anticipation, thrill, and winning at Grand Casino. Grand Casino, let your story begin.
It's always a good time to talk college basketball. Nobody else I would rather do that with than Marcus Fuller from the Star Tribune. Marcus, how you doing?
Better not be Rand. I mean, come on now.
Who else would I talk with?
Who else would I talk here? Yeah.
Who else would I talk college hoops with other than you? Especially if we're talking at the Star Tribune. You've got a lockdown on all things Gophers, all things college basketball, and the team you're covering is kind of interesting right now. I think they're better than they were. They've had some pretty standout performances. They're dealing with some absences. They had a good win against Nebraska. Maybe kind of give me a lay of the land of the program right now.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard for me to remember the last time we talked. I want to have to talk about the whole season. I'm pretty sure we talked since then, but
yeah.
I mean, we'll just go right off the bat and talk about the record-setting night that Elijah Hawkins had. First of all, this is a transfer from Howard that, going into the season, he was going to help the Gophers change the way they play, their style of play. They wanted to speed up the tempo, play a fast-paced style, and he was a perfect player for that. I mean, and so coming into the season, he was their starting point guard. He had some turnover troubles early on. He led the Big Ten in turnovers with almost 4 a game. And, so going into Big Ten play, they really needed him to figure out how to become better making decisions and obviously cutting down on his mistakes. And he did that in a big way last night, or I want to say last night, the other night on Tuesday with 17 assists, breaking the Gophers team record held by Ariel McDonald in 1994. I won't ask you if you're at that game. It was Wisconsin, so you
Uh,
better not have missed
I
it.
was not, but I guess I was probably a freshman that year. So, well, depending
Yeah.
on when it was, was it winter of '94? So yeah, I wasn't there yet. It was the year before my freshman year, so I couldn't have been there yet. I was a senior in high school in North Dakota, so I would not have been able to be there for that.
Oh, it's too bad. You missed out.
Close,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, the people who didn't show up for the Gophers game versus IUPUI, they missed the record-setting night. Not only did he have 17 assists, but he also had just one turnover.
Wow.
Okay, and then so I actually looked that up, and the last time a college basketball player from a power conference had 17 assists at least, and one or fewer turnovers, which would be no turnovers,
Yeah.
was Tyrese Halliburton,
Oh,
who is the best passer, obviously in the NBA right now. When he was at Iowa State in 2018,
wow.
so he also had a 17 assist, one turnover game. And we're talking about, I guess one of the best passers maybe in the world right now, in Tyrese Halliburton. So I'm not going to go ahead and put Elijah Hawkins in that category
No,
yet,
of course not. Yeah.
but it just goes to show you what kind of player that they have now, that can orchestrate their offense. And right now he's leading the Big Ten in assists. No shock, but I mean before that he was pretty close, and now he has the lead. So really, it's about the record, but it's also about the fact that he's cutting down on his turnovers. I mean, with 17 assists, he could have easily had like 6 or 7 turnovers and still been a pretty good assist to
Sure.
turnover ratio.
Sure.
So that was an amazing night for him. And I mean, I think that we both know that point guards are hard to find, especially in the portal and near the Gophers, and people are looking for a guy that's going to come in and play right away and actually make a difference. And so I think them getting a guy like this really made a difference.
Well, I think more impressive to me, even than probably the record-setting night, was, I mean, that's his third straight game over, in double digits, and that includes their win over Nebraska, which, I think, Ben Johnson has said that was, flat out the biggest win they've had. And, maybe you look at that and say, is Nebraska really that big of a win? I mean, Nebraska's a decent team this year, but just in terms of their confidence, their ability to win a home game early in the year and build some of that confidence, be able to draw back on that. But yeah, Hawkins had 12 points, 11 assists in that game. Did have 4 turnovers, but still a good game from him. Like, if that tells me that he's got the ability not just to do it against IUPUI, Huey, he can do it against Nebraska too, and some of the other kind of comparable teams in the Big Ten.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about Nebraska. So I think Ben Johnson mentioned that as I would say his most important win,
Yeah.
because of the circumstances surrounding it. Like,
Yep.
going into that game, they obviously had a lot of momentum. The way Dawson Garcia was playing, had 36 points versus Ohio State, 28 in the second half. No Big Ten player had as that many points in a game this year, even Zach Edey. He injures his ankle, okay, in the first half.
Yep.
And he tries to go out there, and he's basically done for the night. He tries to go out there second half, but he just couldn't do it. They were down 17 points in the first half, 15 at halftime. No Garcia, who just come off his best game any Big Ten player had.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
Right.
And Elijah Hawkins is a huge part of that. Josh Joseph had an amazing second half. He's been playing unbelievable lately. But in the second half of that game, you mentioned the 4 turnovers, but in the second half, Elijah Hawkins had 8 of his 11 assists and just 1 turnover.
Yeah.
And, so he was part of the reason why they were struggling in the beginning of that game, down 15 or 17. And then in the second half, they outscored Nebraska by 26 points. And he was, again, the orchestrator without turning over the ball. And so I think that was the one thing that spurred him to have the games that he's having now. After that Nebraska win, he ended up having 11 assists in the next game versus Florida Gulf Coast.
Yep.
With just 1 turnover. And then now 17 assists with just 1 turnover. So, I mean, we're not only just looking at one of the best passers in the Big Ten, but in the country. And he was that last year when he was at Howard. Right. He averaged 6 assists a game, but he also led the nation in turnovers with 4.
Okay.
So Ben Johnson and his staff trying to make Elijah Hawkins not only as their starting point guard, but one that's one of the best in the Big Ten. It seems to be going in the right direction. But again, like you mentioned, the Nebraska game was important because it was a Big Ten opponent, and they have one coming up in January. Michigan will be their first Big Ten
Yeah,
opponent
of the new year. Yeah.
with the new year.
Yeah, I know, and they're going to be. I don't know what Garcia's status is. It's obviously an ankle. Do they have a kind of timetable on when he might be back?
They're really, I know you've covered, sports a long
Oh
time.
yeah,
Coaches hate timetables putting
yes,
it on there because then, fans expect this. And then
yes,
obviously teammates are like, oh, we're going to get back, this game or whatever. And then they don't. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, no, what are we going to do? So I think, internally, I'm sure Dawson wants to come back and play the next game,
yep,
but I think externally they're definitely making it known that it's an injury that it's not a high ankle sprain, so it won't keep him out long term. But at the same time, they're playing Michigan on January 4th.
yep,
They don't need to bring him back just yet. And by the way, when people just say, Ewy Pewy and this record
yep,
didn't mean anything because it's against
right,
them, you know what? Chicago State beat Northwestern last night.
right,
Okay. Chicago State was worse than Ewy Pewy
yep,
in the Ken Palm rankings, the net rankings, and all of the stuff that they use to measure college basketball. They were worse than Ewy Pewy. So Chicago State beat Northwestern. Northwestern beat Purdue. I mean, you can go and compare scores, but every night you got to come with it in college basketball these days, especially because you have a lot of older players and transfers, and there's no guaranteed wins. So, to not have Dawson Garcia the last two games, and obviously second half versus Nebraska, and then win those games. They have two more games left leading into that Big Ten, the rest of the Big Ten schedule. And, this is not inside information, but I think, you probably see Dawson come back maybe at the end of that, just before Big
okay,
Ten.
yeah,
But the fact that they've shown that they can win without him, with other guys stepping up, that's huge. Because if they feel like, sitting him until the Big Ten schedule starts again is the best thing for him to make sure that he can finish the season strong. So far, they've shown that they're capable of doing that.
they'll also be without Braden Carrington for an indefinite amount of time. That announcement coming just a few days ago. I've been impressed with kind of the response. Ben Johnson giving Braden Carrington all sorts of support. What can you speak to on that?
Yeah, I mean, most importantly, you feel for the kid. We cover sports and high school, college, pro levels, but everyone's human, and we go through a lot of adversity and stress, and then when you see someone having to step away from the sport, it's tough. I mean, it was shocking, surprising for a lot of people, because Braden Carrington was obviously not only a really good person, but he also was a very good player.
Yeah,
Starting best defender on the team, maybe one of the best defenders in the Big Ten. He was playing his best basketball and really seemed to be enjoying his team and everything. And so, but a lot of times you don't know what's going on
of course.
behind the scenes with his life and school. A lot of pressure. Ben Johnson mentioned after the game about the pressures of being a college athlete, with academics, and obviously he's a starter, and there's a lot of responsibility there and things like that. So I think that there's taking their time. It's an indefinite leave of absence is what they're calling it.
Yep.
Braden Carrington did announce on social media that he was taking time for himself.
Yep.
So and then the Park Center's having a Braden Carrington appreciation night, which I certainly understand, wanting to show support for a player that was there and won the state championship and won Mr. Basketball. Making sure people, he knows that people care about him, which I think he knows already. I'm not sure when he'll return, but I think that they expect him to at some point. And, he's going to be a very important piece when he does return, hopefully in the right state of mind and mentally and everything, that he can help them in the Big Ten. I mean, he's one of the best defenders out there. Very, very instrumental in their win versus Nebraska. He held Keisei Tominaga to 4 points and no field goals in that game. And
Wow.
Tominaga He scored 20 versus Creighton. Last year, he had 6 20-point games in his last 9 games. I mean, he was an all Big Ten preseason player coming in, and he's a very good shooter. And to limit him to that, and he's done that to other players this season, he's a very important part of the team.
Given what we've seen so far of this team, I got a couple other things for you after this, but given what we've seen, I mean, are they about what we thought they would be? Kind of more talented, better, but we still don't quite know what they are yet. Do you think they're better than you thought they'd be? Where do you put them at this point in the season?
I would say they're more talented for sure. Better than I thought they would be, no.
Okay.
I expected them to, I mean, especially the way they started versus Missouri, up 20 points.
Yeah.
I expected them to win that game, so they did not.
Right.
I expected them to compete much better versus San Francisco, maybe even have a chance to win. They did not.
Right.
They were down 22 versus Ohio State. I did not expect them to be down 22 versus Ohio State.
Okay.
And they came back from that one and they almost won. So those are good signs, not the Missouri and the San Francisco loss, but I would say the Ohio State, ever since Ohio State coming back from that deficit,
yep,
they're a little bit below the expectations that I had, just in the fact that they for the whole season so far, they haven't been able to put like a whole game together consistently. They've done that recently against, maybe softer competition, but they still haven't put a whole game together against a really good team. And so I'm still waiting for that. That being said, the talent is there, the depth is there, and that's why they were able to beat, yes, it's IUPUI, but they handled that game, pretty easily without Garcia, without Braden Carrington, 2 starters. And, there's a lot of guys playing well right now. I mean, Josh Ola-Joseph, the way he's playing, it kind of got lost with the record that Hawkins set. I mean, he started off that game 6 for 6 from the field, and he had 14 of their first 21 points. This is a player who, his senior year of high school, he started 0 games because he was at a really good prep school in Arizona. And coming into the freshman year, he was the least heralded player in that class behind Braden Carrington, who was Mr. Basketball, and Pharrell Payne, who was the best prospect in that class. And, everybody knows how good Pharrell, his potential is, and he's been banged up this year, and he hasn't completely, been able to make the impact that he's capable of. But, but Joshua Ola-Joseph, right now has been the most productive player in that class, where he was kind of an afterthought because he had left Minnesota. He was an Osseo kid and people forgot about him. So he's playing the best basketball on the team right now. He led them in scoring 2 games, and then last game they sat him because they were up 30. But he, after he had 14 of their first 21, they're like, all right, Josh, we're good. We're good. Let's have some other guys play. And then obviously we know what Hawkins is doing. Cam Christie has scored in double figures in 4 of the last 5 games, and he led them with 20 in the last game. He's actually the leading scorer of all freshmen in the Big Ten, and averaging nearly 12 a game. So that's why you have these pieces there. When they all come back together, when Garcia is healthy, and if Carrington comes back sooner than later, I'd like to see what that team does in the Big Ten. I'd like to see what they can do for a full game. And then I'll probably make a better evaluation about them. But I would say they're probably just a little bit below expectation that I had right now. But their style of play is definitely a surprise. I did not expect them to play this fast and this style. And they're even when they lose, even when they're turning over the ball, sometimes a lot in games, they're still fun to watch, which is that's kind of what it's all about.
I'm glad you brought up Cam Christie, because it kind of segues into what I want to talk about next with you. We were kind of talking about this before we started, but just like recruiting, the way that recruiting is changing in college sports. We were talking about Gopher football and some of those high-profile Gopher football player recruits decommitting, getting looks at big-time schools elsewhere. You have the kid going to USC now. They might lose another one to Ohio State here before signing day and not too long, depending on when that happens. You had the whole saga last year with the Gophers. I mean, Christie signed. He was a huge recruit for them, but the whole Dennis Evans thing. Dennis Evans, by the way, not having much of an impact so far this year, but we'll give him a chance out in Louisville. But just the nature of recruiting has changed so much. And like you had kind of mused, like, what would happen if a big time basketball recruit. Basketball is a sport where one player can really transform a program more than just
Definitely.
football.
Yeah.
But like if someone from Minnesota had committed to the Gophers and then decommitted and gone somewhere else, like what would that be like?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the sky would be falling way more than it did with Dennis Evans. I tell you that.
Yes.
I mean, Dennis Evans was a five-star center, seven
Yeah.
footer. I mean, there's a lot that you just looked at his measurables and you're like, holy smokes,
Sky doesn't have far to fall to hit him. He's pretty tall.
yeah, exactly. But we're taught. Let's be hypothetical here. Let's just go back to Chet Holmgren, Jalen
Yeah.
Suggs, players like that recently. I mean, Sam Mitchell just was talking recently about I could have got Chet Holmgren if I was the coach of the Gophers. Let's just say that I said Richard Pitino. No, that was Ben's first year. So Ben's first year here. Let's say he got as soon as he got on campus, Chet Holmgren got committed.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Chet Holmgren decommitted right before signing day.
Yeah.
And went to Gonzaga. I
That'd be
mean,
something. Yeah.
that would be the start of Ben's career, and
Right.
then all of a sudden the end of it. Before I'm kidding, but
I know. I
like
get you. Yeah.
in the fans' eyes, that would be really really harsh to start off like that. And so that never happened. It's hypothetical, but we're seeing now with football that you can make really good evaluations with kids. So let's be honest. And Randy Johnson, our football writer, we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, the kid that's going to USC, he didn't have the USC offer when the Gophers, he committed to the Gophers.
Right.
The kid that Ohio State is on him and everything, and he didn't have that offer when he committed to the Gophers.
Yep.
So you do have to go from the kid's angle in that, hey, at that time I really wanted to play for the Gophers, stay home. I love PJ Fleck, I still love him, but
Yeah.
I didn't have that option. Would I've done that if I had that option then? So there's that. And then since the beginning of time, there's always been coaches who still recruit kids when they're committed to other schools.
Of course.
I'm sure the Gophers do it too.
Of course. Yeah.
So, but the question you asked in the beginning is, how harsh would it be if this happened to the Gophers? It's
Basketball
even
team,
bigger
yeah.
in basketball.
Yes.
It's even bigger in basketball because it's a make or break. I mean, if the number one player in Minnesota commits to the Gophers and they are a 5-star recruit, which I can't remember the last time that happened. That's probably Chris Humphreys. Chris Humphreys did the opposite. He was committed to Duke and then he came here.
Right.
I would say that would be really hard to overcome as a program until you get on the court with the players that are actually there and then you win. And so, I have to think back to, it's before my time, but I'm pretty sure Khalid El-Amin committed to the Gophers and then he went to UConn later.
Yeah.
Decommitted. And I think that's the last time that I remember a kid of that magnitude doing something like that in basketball. I know Royce White obviously committed to the Gophers and was here on with the program, and then he ended up at Iowa State. But there's a lot of other off-the-court issues that caused that. It just doesn't happen in basketball. And the scary thing is, will it happen in basketball? Is this the start of something that not just for Minnesota, but teams like Minnesota, where you do such a good job recruiting a kid that maybe is just a 5-star kid that wants to stay home, or he's undervalued, and at the time he didn't have a lot of offers. And then when before signing day, he's like, oh man, this team wants me and that team wants me. So this will be something that yes, basketball coaches like Don Plutz-White and Ben Johnson will face at some point here. They'll face a situation where they'll have a kid locally that they commit, and then right before signing day, they're having to convince him not to go elsewhere. And by the way, that did happen a little bit with Isaac Asima, who is signed with the Gophers. I mean, right before he signed, I mean, he had this summer, he had a really good summer.
Yep.
Really good summer at the end of the summer. And he had some big time offers that came to him after he had committed to the Gophers and before he signed, and he decided to stay home.
Wow.
So there's a little bit about the kid too. I'm not saying it was Ohio State worthy in basketball. That would be like what, Kentucky or Kansas or something.
Sure.
But I do think that it comes down to the where the program is, the coach that you have a relationship with, and also the team that the new team that's offering you.
Well, and now it's not just the prestige of the other program too. It's NIL money. Like if some team can come in and offer you a lot more NIL in some cases, then that incentivizes things in ways that we just didn't have to deal with 5-10 years ago even. So it's a whole new world, Marcus. Hey, before you go, you started the basketball across Minnesota feature again, very popular. So is this the third year of it? I can't remember. Is that third year?
Yeah, it's year 3, and I just couldn't be more appreciative of our editors, Joe Christensen, Chris Carr, for allowing me to, step away from the Gophers a little bit and do this column. Chip does an awesome job with FAM, football across Minnesota. I mean, he's the one that came up with that idea initially. And then, because I love basketball so much, I was happy to do it during the basketball season. And my latest column is about Ioka. She goes by Yoki.
Yeah.
Her nickname Lee from Byron. She came out of Byron. She was a really good high school player, but wasn't offered by the Gophers. And she went to Kansas State injured. She had a knee injury. And then all of a sudden, when she came back from that, she turned into one of the best players in the country. Had 61 points and state record in a game 2 years ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
And right after that season, she tore her ACL and she was out for the year again. And I talked to her recently about coming back from that injury and leading K-State back to prominence. They're number 12 in the country right now, and they actually beat Iowa and Caitlin Clark earlier in the year, and she outplayed Caitlin Clark. They did play twice, actually.
Yeah, why did they play twice? Can you explain that to me? Was one of them in like a tournament or something, or what happened?
Yeah, one of them was like that, and then one of them was a regularly scheduled like home game. It was a home game for Iowa. Okay. So, and again, besides the Caitlin Clark thing, Ioka Lee was a huge name in the college basketball world 2 years ago after she broke the NCAA record, which actually by 1 point over Rachel Banham.
Yeah, that's right.
It's crazy. 2 Minnesota players that are NCAA record holders, one currently now, and she has a brother that plays for St. Thomas and Ajani, and so when she was sitting out last year, she really wanted to help him not only understand how to go into college and make an impact, but also show him that you could bounce back from adversity if adversity hits. So she's been a good role model for her brother and then for other players. And I'm glad to see her playing well this year for K-State.
For sure. Well, we look forward to reading many more of those in the next couple of months as the season really swings into full force. I feel like college basketball, once we get past the new year into kind of the meat of the conference seasons, and we'll see how the Gophers do this year. It's I'm more interested in them. I'm more intrigued. I've liked some of the things that we've seen so far, and I'll be curious to see kind of what they look like if and when they are at full strength against some of these comparable teams. I'm not expecting them to be top 4, but can they be top 8? Can they be top 9 or 10? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, it should be fun. There's certainly a chance.
All right. Thanks, Marcus. Appreciate it as always. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.
Good stuff from Marcus. Feel a little bad we didn't talk any St. Thomas basketball, so let's do it right here. 84-79 loss at number 7 Marquette on Thursday for the St. Thomas men's basketball team. That is a very good showing, even if they ultimately came up short. They were within a point in the last few minutes of that game, put a real scare into what has been one of the best teams in college basketball this season. So another kind of step along the way for St. Thomas in their journey from Division III to Division I. This is still just their 3rd season in Division I, men's basketball, Division I sports across the board. And, like I said, they didn't win the game, but to get that kind of result on the road against a top 10 team, that is an impressive performance. So I'm going to have to get over there a little bit more, go check out a game one of these days, see what's going on over there, because they're building something over there. Patrick Royce, a lot of us would love to see St. Thomas play the Gophers in men's basketball at some point here, maybe a couple years down the road. That would become a fun rivalry, I would have to imagine, in a lot of different sports, especially basketball, men's and women's. But for now, St. Thomas definitely building something over there. Let us finish with the cooler. Emailer Nicholas made me laugh this morning. Subject line was Raiders offensive stat. They've averaged 31.5 points per game over a 4-day stretch, Sunday to Thursday. That was perfect. 0 points for the Raiders, of course, in that 3-0 loss to the Vikings on Sunday. I'll circle back on that in a minute. 63 points for the Raiders in a Thursday night football win over the much embattled Chargers head coach Brandon Staley. I don't know how he survives this season, especially after that kind of result. But yeah, 63 points for the Raiders after being shut out by the Vikings just 4 days previous. That is quite the stat. Another reader of mine, another listener of mine, Brent, says, hey, with all the points the Raiders are scoring, maybe the Vikings' defensive effort holding them to 0 was better than they got credit for. I thought we gave them plenty of credit in that game already, but it's a good point. When the Raiders can hang 63, I don't care if it's a team that's kind of packed it in, a team that is kind of going nowhere and is having a disappointing season. If you can hang 63, you've got something going to hold the team that's capable of scoring 63 to 0. That is quite the disparity, I would say. And yeah, is another reason to feel confident about the Brian Flores defense. Now, interesting side note, of course, in that 3-0 game, Josh Dobbs was pulled. Nick Mullins took over. On Tuesday, Mullins was named the starter for Saturday's game, tomorrow's game, as it were, against Cincinnati. Dobbs will be the number 3 quarterback in this game. I thought that was pretty interesting. We found out Thursday that Jaron Hall will serve as the backup quarterback in this game. All 3 quarterbacks will be active, but Dobbs will be serving as the emergency quarterback. Hall designated the number 2 quarterback. O'Connell explaining he wants to give Hall some more kind of reps this week as if he was the starter, kind of getting him more into the mix, into that kind of for his development. So I don't know if we've seen the last twist and turn in the Vikings quarterback scramble this season. Mullins will become their 4th different starter when he takes the field in tomorrow's game. 4th different starter this season. That's never happened in Vikings history. So we will see what they have in store for us the rest of the year, but we know for sure what the pecking order is for Saturday. It goes Mullins, Hall, and Dobbs after Dobbs played almost all of the previous 4.5 to 5 games. So the carousel is still turning, folks. We'll see where it lands after this week. And that'll do it for me this week. Full slate of shows coming up next week, but from a programming standpoint, should note that the week between Christmas and New Year's, there'll only be one show. I think it'll come out late in the week, kind of a best of the year, top 10 stories of the year kind of show. Working on that right now, but taking some time off between Christmas and New Year's for the holidays. So plan accordingly. I don't know if you're going to have to plan much accordingly, but be a great time to catch up on any shows you've missed and catch up, of course, on just some quality time with your family, friends, loved ones, etc. But next week, full slate of shows, some good stuff coming up, of course, with Royce on Monday and beyond. Until then, I am Michael Rand. Enjoy the weekend. Back at it again on Monday.